What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the next Josh Nader Plays video. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Dead by Daylight, which is still a little bit of a new game for me. I haven't posted any content of it yet, but I plan on doing Let's Plays or maybe live streams in the future, depending on how this video goes. So over the past few weeks, I've gotten to play as every single killer in the game at least twice, and now I think I have enough information to judge, based on my opinion, what the best killer in the game is and the worst killer. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is we're going to be ranking every single killer in Dead by Daylight from worst to best. I just want to note real quick that there's a few killers on this list that I've only played 2 or 3 times, so I'm kind of going off of the killer's ability without add-ons, because I don't typically use add-ons anyway with the killers that I frequently use. So with that out of the way, let's jump right in with number 12. So yeah, number 12 is Freddy. I think pretty much everybody will see this coming. I don't even have any gameplay footage of him because I never wanted to play him again after the first 2 times. Now there's no doubt that even the worst of killers in this game can be played very well and can actually get a 4K on some of the best survivors. But I could honestly go on for days about how trash Freddy is. His biggest weakness is the fact that you simply can't even attack survivors unless you put them in the dream state, which takes a whopping 7 seconds to do. And that's virtually the only thing that distinguishes him from another killer like the Wraith or the Trapper. It's just that he lacks any other abilities that give him an advantage. So if anything, this killer is at a complete disadvantage. I think there's a lot of ways they could improve this killer by perhaps making it take less time to put players into the dream state. Otherwise, it's just physically impossible to keep survivors on the hooks, or even face camp if you decide to do so. On top of his terrible base abilities, his perks also don't do a whole lot until endgame, which is never a good thing. Number 11 is the Wraith. Now I know a lot of people started out with this killer, and he's really not god-awful, but then again, he still pales in comparison to any other killer that's above him in this list. So the Wraith's special ability is to cloak himself, or turn invisible. Although he can move very fast when in this mode, the unfortunate part is when you uncloak, it takes a few seconds, and you also ring a bell, so any survivor that has half a brain is going to run the other way when they see you coming. That's the other issue with the Wraith, is that you can actually see him moving around when he's cloaked. It's just a lot harder to notice. Once he's in a chase, he really has nothing going for him. He can easily be looped just like any other base killer. And the cloaking mechanic typically doesn't give him any advantage or getting closer to survivors to end a chase quickly. With all that said, I think it's pretty easy to see why he is just not as good as the rest of the killers on the list. Moving on to number 10, we have the Trapper. Now, I'm really not trying to hate on the original killers, because I know that the Wraith and the Trapper were kind of the OG. The Trapper beats out the Wraith just by a little bit because his traps can actually be a little bit more useful than the cloaking mechanism. It's easy to mow down survivors by placing your traps near hooks or by generators, especially if you can find really good hiding places for them, like in the bushes or in the tall grass where people can't see them. This is another scenario, however, in which the Trapper isn't particularly terrible. It's just that all the other killers that are above him in the list have more advantages. Smart survivors can easily disable the bear traps, or even just avoid them altogether if they know where to look. And in the end, if he isn't near the survivor that actually steps into the trap, it's going to help him in no way, shape, or form when he actually gets into a chase. I do have to say that I enjoyed playing as this killer up in the higher ranks, rank 2019, where the survivors don't really look around for the traps as much, even when they know they're facing the Trapper. But once you get into the lower ranks, the problem is that the survivors are just way too smart and they know to watch out. I would say this is the last low tier killer, and we are now starting to move into the mid tier or decent killers. Coming in at number 9, we have the Cannibal or Leatherface. So by far the most interesting quality about this killer is his chainsaw. It's his main ability, and it's what sets him a little bit above the Trapper, the Wraith, and the Nightmare. After charging the chainsaw at the right moment, players can outright kill survivors with one hit, which is extremely useful in ending chases quickly. It's also extremely useful that this chainsaw can go through pallets, so you don't have to destroy them by kicking them in like you typically have to. This makes him a lot more difficult to loop, although he's still very vulnerable to windows. In a lot of ways, the Cannibal feels like a variation on the Hillbilly, which is a little bit refreshing, but at the same time, you don't have that movement speed increase that the Hillbilly has when he uses his chainsaw. That being said, if you ever get a cluster of survivors in one spot, The cannibal's chainsaw can actually one-shot multiple survivors in the same hit. The main issue I have with this is that there's a very limited number of scenarios where pulling this off will actually be possible or useful. The one time it can be extremely useful, though, is if you time it just right when a survivor is trying to pull off a save. So that's one thing to consider if you like to use the cannibal. Coming in at number 8, we have the Doctor. Now first, let me start by saying I absolutely hate going up against this killer when I'm a survivor. It absolutely sucks. That being said, I don't really think I hate him because he's extremely powerful as a killer. So the Doctor has two basic modes. He has Punishment mode, which is just the basic 115% killer speed, and then he has Treatment mode. When in Treatment mode, the Doctor is a lot slower, but he's able to perform shock therapy on any nearby survivors, which gives away their location. Doing this repeatedly will drive survivors into madness. Madness will cause survivors to shriek uncontrollably and also hinders their ability to properly do skill checks at times. While I think the Doctor is super useful in terms of tracking survivors, he doesn't have any advantages in the actual chase, and he doesn't have the ability to attack survivors in any unique ways or to one-shot them. Treatment mode often also wastes a lot of your valuable time that you could be spending searching for survivors rather than just hoping that they're in a close radius to you and you can drive them into madness. Number 7 is the Pig. Now, the Pig is a super unique killer in that she has multiple abilities that set her above other killers. First of all, she has the ability to crouch, which eliminates the terror radius and allows her to sneak up on survivors unsuspectingly. While in crouch, you can either come out of crouch to attack survivors, or you can also do a special lunge attack, which has tons of range. This is a fantastic way to patrol generators, although you are fairly slow at moving when you're crouched. The Pig also has the ability to put reverse bear traps onto the heads of dying survivors. This ability is more of a time waster than anything else, because as long as players know how to remove them, which you just have to go to these little stations and actually remove them yourself, it seems like players don't die a whole lot from them, but they are timed, so if you don't take it off after a while, it will kill you. It's a nice little touch though, because if survivors do get a bear trap on their head and then they get freed, they have to go remove it before they can go back to work on generators or helping other survivors. Overall, I think the Pig is a pretty decent killer. She does have multiple abilities, which makes her very unique and very versatile in the right hands. Coming in at number 6, we have the Clown. This is a very fun killer to play as, and I enjoy the simplicity of playing as him. He doesn't have any complicated gimmicks or mechanics. Basically, you run around and chase after survivors, and you can throw these bottles that contain a toxic gas that actually causes survivors to scream, as well as hinder their movement speed significantly. The only disadvantage to the Clown is after throwing 2 of these smoke bombs, you have to actually reload them, which takes a little bit of time and slows you down. But with that aside, this mechanic works very well, although it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to aim properly with it. I think what earns the Clown his spot on this list is the fact that his bottles of gas can actually end the chases pretty quickly, especially if you have pallet loopers. You can actually throw the gas bottles on one side of the loop, blocking the survivors, because if they walk through it too much, they'll be slowed down and you'll be able to catch up to them in no time. Coming in at number 5 is the very underrated Hag. I don't like comparing killers too much, but the Hag is basically a very upgraded version of the Trapper. Despite this, her traps are a lot different and actually have a different mechanic. She has up to 10 traps that she can place in any point in the map and have them all be there at the same time, and basically, if a survivor walks too close to them without being crouched, they'll be jump scared by a phantom version of the Hag, which she can then teleport to, or not if she decides not to. The fun thing about the Hag is that there's so many great places you can put traps to really catch survivors off guard, such as around hooks, around entrances to buildings, maybe even right next to generators. Sometimes you can even end the chase in a pallet looping situation by putting a trap on the right side of the pallet. The only big disadvantages I can think of for the Hag are, first of all, she is actually set a little bit lower than most killers, so her field of vision isn't quite as good as the others. She can't see as much up. The other issue with her is that her traps can be completely avoided by crouching down. I'm pretty sure you can even destroy them with flashlights, but I haven't actually seen that demonstrated before. Overall, very solid killer, and I can't wait to play as her more because I'm just starting to really get into the Hag. In the number 4 spot, we have the Huntress. The Huntress, although difficult to use, earns her spot for being the only killer in the game that can use projectiles to kill survivors. She does start with a limited number of throwing axes, but you can actually get more from inside of the closets. With her ability to use throwing axes, she is practically impossible to pallet loop in the right hands, although some survivors have gotten very good at avoiding the axes by cutting at just the right moment. The Huntress also loses some mobility in exchange for her projectile attacks, which does hinder her a little bit when you compare her to more fast killers that have the basic 115% speed. She only has 5% less, which is not too bad. I still struggle a little bit with hitting my throwing axes, but I'm sure when I master this, I'll be using the Huntress a lot more. Alright, so now we're moving into the top 3 killers, which I would consider to be the top tier or the best 3 killers in the game. So coming in at number 3 we have Michael Myers, or the Shape. This is easily my favorite killer to play as in the game right now, and I have just been farming him like crazy. This killer basically has 3 different modes. They are Evil Within 1, Evil Within 2, and then finally Evil Within 3. You progress through these stages by stalking survivors, which slows you down significantly, but it's easy to do when they're from a distance or they're all grouped up. During Evil Within 1, Myers has no terror radius whatsoever. He also unfortunately has a much slower movement speed, but once into Evil Within 2, he gains the typical killer's 115% movement speed, as well as his terror radius back. Evil Within 3 does not last very long, but it is extremely powerful, allowing him to one-shot survivors and also have an extremely long lunge. Although Myers can still be looped pretty well, I do think that he is a top tier killer mainly because of his ability to one-shot survivors in Evil Within 3. If you can master stalking survivors without them noticing you, you'll be a pro at getting 4Ks with this guy. Coming in second place we have the Almighty Nurse. Yes, I've seen other videos of people ranking the killers, and I know so many people think that the Nurse is the best killer in the game by far. I have to agree that her ability to blink and teleport through basically anything except for rocks and some clusters of trees makes her very powerful. This makes her immune to windows, pallets, and even walls. Despite moving even slower than survivors do at base speed, her ability to blink extremely large distances in a small amount of time makes her very versatile at catching survivors and ending chases very quickly. I didn't put the Nurse in second place because I necessarily think she has any flaws, but I put her in second place because I feel like there's a lot of user error potential when you're playing as the Nurse. Ending quick chases often involves you having to blink a certain distance to get right within range of hitting the survivor. This can often be very difficult to pull off, and it can be punishing if you miss multiple times in a row because each time you have to cool down and it takes a few seconds to snap out of it. If this list was ranking the killers that had the highest skill cap, I would definitely have to say the Nurse, because if you can master the blink times, there is no obstacle that can stop this killer, and I mean that quite literally. So in the number 1 spot, I'm sure you figured it out by process of elimination, we have the Hillbilly. The Hillbilly definitely is in second place in terms of mobility right behind the Nurse, but he makes up for that in being able to one-shot survivors with his chainsaw an unlimited number of times per game. The chainsaw launch can end chases so fast, and this puts incredible map pressure on the survivors. Being able to move 3 times your normal speed in order to one-shot a survivor is a pretty intimidating thing, and every time I'm going up against a Hillbilly, I know even if this player is a noob, I'm probably going to have to be pretty careful. I easily have my most 4K games with the Hillbilly, and for good reason too. The chainsaw does require precise timing and aim, but once mastered, this is definitely a great killer to dominate with, and that's why I put him in the number 1 spot as the best killer in Dead by Daylight at this moment. Just want to say at the end here that they just recently released a patch for this game, and if any others are released in the future, this might change the list. I know the Wraith recently got a buff. It was nothing big, but things like that will happen, and it will definitely change the rankings, and I'll be sure to stay up to date on that. Alright guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Make sure you let me know in the comments what your list would be. Also, let me know if you want to see more Dead by Daylight content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.